And away we go. It's just me at the moment. Not sure if Risk and or Eric are going to join. Either way, the show must go on. So, let's see what's going on in the world today. G20 lands in Africa. China calls for unity over division. For the first time since its inception, G20 Leaders Summit has come to the African continent. Johannesburg is hosting the gathering from November 22nd to November 23rd, making a notable shift in global governance. Emerging economies and developing nations are no longer observing from the sidelines, but moving closer to the center of decision making. That's it. That's the story. Okay. That seems a bit short, however. It was going to happen. Like, Africa may not be as developed as other places around the world. However, its population is growing at an alarming rate, and the state of its current economy amongst African nations is just in its infancy. Whatever is coming out of Africa in terms of economical power is only the beginning, and it's going to keep on growing. Would it overtake China? Maybe, maybe. And regardless of China's involvement with African nations as a whole is on the rise, whether people like it or not. I can see some business being done in Africa, and it's going to skyrocket. Somehow, it will for sure. Royal Navy intercepts two Russian ships in English Channel. On Sunday, HMS 7 intercepted the Russian corvette RFN Stoichi and tanker Yanya as they transited the Dover Strait into the English Channel, the Ministry of Defence said. The MOD said the rise was marked by a 30% increase in Russian naval activity near UK waters over 2 years, with Yanta operating near northwest Scotland this year to gather intelligence and map undersea cables. Conducting a round-the-clock shadow, HMS 7 maintained continuous overwatch as the pair moved west through the English Channel and later handed monitoring to an unidentified NATO ally of Brittany, France. Britain and NATO deployed 3 RAF P-8 Poseidon aircraft to Keflavik Air Base, Iceland, while Healy pressed for higher defence spending to boost jobs and growth on Wednesday. These events come amid a series of recent intercepts, including HMS Duncan tracking Vice Admiral Kulikov and HMS Iron Duke monitoring Novorossiysk, while the Defence Select Committee warned the government is moving at a glacial pace. You can never be too cautious these days with foreign militaries and just getting by and gather whatever information a country is having or possesses. I'm not gonna say that this is all for show, this is all performative, it's just to scare people. You never know what information nations can get from each other or from other oppositions and use that information to their advantage. I'll just leave it at that. This is why having a military is important. It should not just to get into wars, which shouldn't happen to begin with. It's also for the sake of defense, because you never know who's going to come at you, somewhere and anywhere. Australia expands under 16 social media ban to include Twitch, spares Pinterest. Australia's internet regulator has added the streaming platform Twitch to the country's teen social media ban starting next month. From December 10th, Twitch must ensure that under-16s cannot open accounts, and existing accounts held by under-16s will be deactivated from January 9th. The ban, aimed at reducing pressures and risks children face on social media, includes platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, with companies facing fines up to $29.5 million for non-compliance. This could go either way. On one hand, it's important that the safety of children is a priority. On the other hand, does it stop at the children? And another question, do the people in power actually care about the safety of children? Because if not, why bother? And if you try again, if these people in power actually try again to pass something for the name of safety of young people, what does that legislation even entail? The Online Safety Act, for example, in the United Kingdom, the Online Safety Act in the UK, the intention was somewhat similar to what Australia is doing. However, how it's been written is mostly vague. The wording of the Online Safety Act in the UK is open to interpretation. And if that is the case, the UK Online Safety Act can go in different avenues. It could go for porn sites, prevent people that either are children or people that are even adults to not even go ahead and use these websites, or even prevent people from accessing websites where information is absolutely vital. It's absolutely mental. It's not just mental. It's a kind of a threat to our freedom of speech and maybe to some extent freedom of movement digitally. Again, I am not against the safety of children when going online. You just have to ask yourself, what specifically does the social media ban for under 16s entail to ensure the safety of children? And are the people in power right now even committed to online safety for children beyond just social media use? What about community forums? Are there explicit websites where content that children should not be seen is being shown to people of all ages? Where's that? Where are those bullet points? Where are those concerns and points? I haven't heard any of that come about in regarding online safety for children. At best, it's kind of a lackluster attempt for children's safety. At worst, it's kind of a prop that could lead to a dystopian phase in our online use where we're not allowed to go on particular websites because the government says you're not allowed to go onto it. They say it's harmful for your mindset or critical thinking skills. Or dare I say, it's also harmful that if you say something we don't like, we're going to take away all of your benefits and other privileges that you've been grateful to have. I'm just saying, that's the worst that could happen. Well, surely. I know there are people in this world that would know something is wrong, and they will speak out on that, against it, as soon as they can, and gather as much people as they can to speak out against such issues. That I know for sure is likely to happen, regardless of wherever you stand on the aisle. Extinction Rebellion climate activist dye Venice Grand Canal green. Huh, okay. Let's see where this goes. Codename Stop Ecocide. Environmental activist from the Extinction Rebellion group dyed Venice's Green Canal green on Saturday, November 22nd, as the UN climate conference in Brazil concluded at an agreement that failed to include a plan to phase out fossil fuels. The most important global summit for defining international political agreements aimed at countering climate and social collapse is drawing to a close, and once again this year, Italy has been among the countries blocking the most ambitious proposals, said Paola, an activist quoted without a last name by the association in a statement. The renowned Swedish activist Greta Thunberg was present at the action, which saw protesters dressed entirely in red, their faces veiled, slowly marched through the crowds of tourists. Some then poured green dye, which they assured was harmless to the environment, to denounce the mass effects of climate collapse. The same gestures was repeated in canals, rivers, lakes, and fountains in 10 Italian cities. The Po River in Turin, the Reno River in Bologna, the Tara River in Taranto, as well as fountains in Padua and Genoa, were among those affected, according to Extinction Rebellion. The goal of the COP30 discussions in Brazil was to reach an agreement that would pave the way for faster reductions in emissions responsible for global warming, which is causing increasingly extreme weather events. But after 2 weeks of negotiations among nearly 200 countries and a final night of talks in Berlin, the participating nations voted on a modest text prepared by the Brazilian presidency of the summit. The Europeans resigned themselves to accepting it in the face of pressure from emerging and oil-producing countries. Personally, I am sick and tired about concerns about what goes on in our climate. Whilst our climate does change in many ways, I feel like I feel like these people don't have a clue on what they're saying and what they plan on doing. Because they say they want to cut down on emissions, but we barely hear anything about cutting down emissions. I think if there are people that are absolutely committed on combating climate change, I think I would have seen on social media, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, and Clapper of all platforms, apparently, there would be videos on such independent projects where you can make renewable fuel to power cars that can be made out of thin air, or possibly water capture bags from humidity, and the water that comes out of these bags are drinkable, as well as water that can be used to water plants. If there are genuine attempts to combat climate change and global warming, there would be independent projects popping about and loads of promotions for said independent projects on social media. I don't think you're going to see much of a driving force in climate activism coming from COP or whatever the world leaders are talking about. They're just there to say, oh, this is bad. We need to do this. We need to do that. Yeah, unless they've had any experience dealing with what they are talking about, how is anyone going to take their word for it? And I know I also said this last time I've read this. Literal native indigenous people in Brazil, where COP30 was taking place, they stormed the convention and protested against whatever was going on and whatever ideas was being going about. Like I've said many times, if you have local native indigenous people whose ancestors their entire lives had lived in rough natural terrain like the Amazon rainforest or anywhere out or any climate outside of urban living, if they have to say something and go against whatever climate actions are spread at COP30, you know something ain't right. Something is up. And I take the indigenous people's word for it. They've lived their entire lives surrounded by nature, using nature to go on about their lives. How often you hear about stories by these climate activists and world leaders saying, I've lived for many months in the jungle, trying to gather food, hunt down animals to eat for dinner and breakfast. I'm not sure they do breakfast in the wild. But at least for dinner, they have to hunt something for the evening. How often you hear stories like that and their experiences with indigenous people? Even if there are people that have contacted and communicated with native indigenous people, even they would have to say something. about whatever is going on, about spreading the word of climate change and climate activism and preventing global warming. They just don't know, and I can't blame them too much on that. However, you can't say something and think everyone is going to agree with it, because there are other people who've actually experienced whatever ideas people have said and say, don't listen to them, that's a terrible idea. We've been through that and look where that got us. That is not a good look if that is the case. I know for sure that if Risk was here, he would certainly say that climate change is a hoax, it's a scam. Other than that, something else is up. But even when there are still people that are going to push forward with ideas of combating global warming, there is a rise in skepticism surrounding climate change, and that trend is going to continue to rise. That is for certain. UAE announces $1 billion AI investment in Africa. The United Arab Emirates said on Saturday it will invest $1 billion to expand artificial intelligence, infrastructure, and AI-enabled services across Africa, with the aim of helping countries to meet national development priorities. UAE Minister of State Saeed bin Mubarak Al Hajiri announced the AI for Development initiative at the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, saying it would bring AI technology to areas such as education, healthcare, and climate adaptation. We consider AI not just as a future industry, but a cornerstone of humanity's future, he said in a statement. Therefore, my country is actively accelerating innovation to enhance productivity and drive significant advancement in the global economy, with a strong commitment to developing responsible and inclusive AI for the benefit of everyone. The UAE is one of the biggest investors in Africa. Its bilateral trade in 2024 reached approximately $107 billion, a 28% increase from the previous year, and its total investments in Africa were over $118 billion between 2020 and 2024, the statement said. Abu Dhabi is investing heavily in AI, with plans to build one of the largest data center hubs in the country with US technology. The UAE is not a member of the Group of 20, which brings together the world's biggest economies, but was invited to the meeting by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is hosting the G20 Leaders Summit for the first time in Africa. Oh yeah, the UAE does invest into Africa, alright, whether it be for good and certainly for bad. Once UAE actually end of the bad investments, then we'll talk. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, surely you should know what's going on in Sudan by now. From what I've heard about the horrible tragedies going on in Sudan, the UAE is playing a part in what's going on in Sudan. Not just whatever investment the UAE is going into Africa. Just like China, the UAE is playing a massive role in what's going on in Africa, and where Africa will go in the next few years. I have many thoughts on this. First and foremost, I'm not too certain what's going on in Sudan, but I know for sure that I haven't heard any good coming from that country so far. Can't possibly imagine how horrible would it be to be there right now, to be caught in a crossfire, going back and forth with many gunfire and shots. It's absolutely devastating. And of course, there's other tragedies going on, such as Nigeria, Ethiopia, Palestine, of course, the Gaza Strip, Ukraine, Myanmar, full countries, especially as changing leadership. Those are at least the tragedies in the world that I know of. There isn't much information about these places going on, but I know that something is up, and something is very wrong. and I hope people in those countries are doing alright. They will pull through, and they will live in peace once more. So back to the AI investment in Africa. I've said a lot on AI. On one hand, AI is a great tool for enhancing industry sectors and providing efficient productivity in tasks in such sectors. On the other hand, being too reliant on AI is going to be quite a problem, especially what we've learned from the Cloudflare servers going down for who knows how long, and people saying, "Oh, we can't use ChatGPT anymore. What are we gonna do? I'm in the shakes right now." People are panicking that ChatGPT wasn't working for the hours that Cloudflare servers weren't working because that's what ChatGPT was running on. They were using Cloudflare servers to keep the website/app running. So people are going back to Google. So at that time, people were going back to Google, asking for whatever queries that they would have asked ChatGPT, and the results they got is a series of websites, products, possibly a couple images, if that still happens. Because people, that's the issue I have. People are so clinged on to ChatGPT as if it was its own assistant and advisor. Next time that AI was to not work for a couple of days, maybe a couple of months, we're going to see people complaining, writing in the comments, saying, "We can't use ChatGPT, I'm absolutely stuck, I'm not sure what to do." Everyone's going to be at a standstill. Now, surely, people in Africa aren't going to make the same mistake. I know they won't. So let's see how this goes. Of course, in countries where lives are still being lost, I hope that ends. I hope people continue living their lives without having to fear for their lives. From military actions, militias, caliphates, dare I say. And a fourth thing that is just as bad. It's scary out there, man. Who knows what's gonna happen? Tourists tricked by fake royal Christmas market. Oh dear. Promotional photographs of a fake Christmas market at Buckingham Palace were generated using artificial intelligence, misleading many tourists as reported by Love and London. The travel account Travellers promoted the fake market to its 2.6 million followers before deleting the post after receiving backlash on social media. The account Love in London alerted potential visitors on TikTok about the false information, emphasizing the absence of the market. Buckingham Palace has announced a real Christmas pop-up shop at the Royal Mews, featuring unique festive items and a full-size advent calendar. Wow, that must have been embarrassing for the promotional team, and also quite worrying for those who thought whatever promotional photos they saw online, thinking, "Oh, we can go to Buckingham Palace and spend our shopping in the Christmas markets there." But no, it was not real to begin with. AI is getting so good that we can't tell what's real and what's fake anymore. Again, that's another concern I have. Because at this point now, AI is progressing and advancing in the span of a few months just as much as the previous few years that came before it. So AI, as impressive it looks and efficient it can do tasks, it's not all sunshine, rainbows, and gold bars with a stack of Benjamin Franklins. The only miracle that we should ever expect to ensure that there isn't any concerning rises coming from AI is if the AI economical bubble bursts and then the valuation of companies that work with AI then stops to dip drastically. That's how we can stop the concerning rise of AI as of now. It's not going to stop AI rise completely. However, to at least put a wedge on how quickly AI is advancing. All we have to do is wait for the AI bubble to burst. Once the AI bubble bursts, valuation of companies working with AI goes down drastically. Now, of course, if we were to learn anything from the 2008 market crash and of course the 2020 COVID lockdowns, a dip in market prices of company shares and economical outputs is also going to put a strain in our day-to-day lives. And I'm not just talking about salaries that people are being paid for working their jobs. It goes deeper than that. I think it's wise that people actually look into this for themselves, as there are many aspects that will certainly vary depending on where you're from and how much of an impact your local community can be impacted by whatever goes on in the world. So yeah, that's that. Canada's Danjunu races to gold in two events at short track speed skating event. Will Danjunu won two gold medals at Gdansk, topping the 500 in 48.849 seconds and capturing 1,500 titles at the Hala Olivia Arena on Saturday at the ISU Short Track World Tour. Building on last season's overall title, Will Danjunu has collected 542 points this season and leads the Crystal Globe standings with a 120-point lead over Pietro Siegel, while Steven Dubois ranks third with 352 points. In detailed results, Danjunu led for 11 of 14 laps in the 1,500 and finished in 2 hours. No, hold on. In 2 minutes 24.135 ahead of Thomas Nandalini, 2 minutes 24.215 seconds. And Pietro Siegel, 2 minutes and 24.288 seconds. Dubois crossed the line men's 500 in 41.505 seconds behind Lin Xiaojun, 41.120 seconds. It marks Danjinu's fourth gold season, and his 1,500 victory helped produce a four-medal day for Canada at the Gdansk stop. Danjunu said the ice conditions were very difficult and required many adjustments, and live coverage continues Sunday at 8:05 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time on CBCSports.ca and CBC Gem. That's wow. That's having a 120 point lead over a second is quite impressive. That is a very impressive achievement. Never thought that would ever be the case. But yeah, here we are. Hopefully, this event goes on to do very well. Even though I'm not sure if how big this event is in Canada or anywhere in the world. However, from what I just read, it looks quite exciting. The amount of time it took to cross the finish line, and having of course a 120-point lead over second place. I don't recall any sport where you can have such a lead like that. That is impressive. Very good. Very nice. Saddam Hussein requested to watch The Passion of the Christ before his execution. Newsweek reported that Saddam Hussein watched The Passion of the Christ shortly before his 2006 execution. He angrily criticized how the Jewish characters treated Jesus, saying Iraqis would have treated him better, and called it the best movie he had ever seen. Wow, the more you know. Now, of course, depending who you ask, a lot of people do not like Saddam Hussein. I can't say I know much about Saddam Hussein, and I'm certainly not going to be convinced. I'm not going to just take this story for granted and say, I guess Saddam Hussein isn't so bad after all. No, I'm not going to be like that. It's good for him to have his opinions about a movie, well, not just any movie, but saying he appreciates a movie of particular themes that would certainly go well with millions, if not billions, of people around the world. I think, I think a couple of years ago, before the infancy of social media, for sure, those days were a lot different as they are today. And it was because of social media access and access to the internet is why we're starting to hear more stories that are, well, not just bad, but also there's more perspectives, more viewpoints, and a lot more voices speaking out on particular issues that are absolutely concerning in this world that otherwise would have been dubbed. All I can say to this is, and I think Eric, if he was here right now, he would say the same thing for sure. Regardless of how people thought of Saddam Hussein, the things he has done, down to how people view the situation, one thing's for sure. He found his way on the path of Christ. And whilst people may not have favorable opinions about Christianity, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or was it whatever spiritual entities, particular Christian denominations describe these days, if you want people to follow, to have an understanding of what your path in life is, you must allow these people to make the choice on their own. Of course, you can still tell them about what it's like on your journey and what you believe in, but you shouldn't just force people to say, if you don't follow this, then this will happen to you. No, that should not be the case. You must allow people to make those choices on their own. And once they make those choices for themselves, I think that's a better testament. That is a much better testament than to have someone say, this is my path. If it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be like this, and I wouldn't be like that, and surely I would have been like this, and I would have ended there, which was not good. Whilst you can have your thoughts, you can still say and talk about your path. Thing is, yeah, and whatever the reason people choose whatever path they want to go down in life, and what beliefs they choose to believe in, is anyone's guess. We can't be too sure unless they actually share that with us. There's always a reason for things in life to happen. So long as we allow things to happen, we have trust and we have faith. Then we can continue with life as we please. Not everyone is perfect in this world, but we can make an effort to follow not to follow a path that gives us internal happiness, but to also follow a path where we improve upon ourselves that has a positive difference in our lives, if that makes sense. Woolly bear caterpillars, can they predict winter weather? Meteorologist Ryan Argenti of WGAL debunked claims that woolly bear caterpillars forecast winter, explaining color variations stem from biological factors, not predictions. Folklore claims that more black banding on woolly bear caterpillars predicts a harsher winter, and that the 13 body segments corresponds to 13 weeks of winter. Biologically, coloring depends on feeding habits, age, and species, while bandwidth on woolly bear caterpillars indicates the past growing season, not future weather. WGAL's Storm team assembled an explainer graphic and aired the segment featuring local viewers' photos, thanking contributors for prompting the discussion on woolly bear folklore. This autumn, as woolly bears appear on front and back porches, local viewers have increased submissions, prompting WGAL to clarify the folklore versus science debate. I can see why people would think that. Not the fact that winter lasts for 13 weeks, but of course the timing when the color segments change on the woolly bear caterpillars at the time of the year that their body just does change colors does add up to believing that when they change color indicates that winter is coming. But I'm not sure how people got the idea about how harsh the winter would be, depending on the color pigmentation of the caterpillars. But hey, at least now people are sending photos and proof evidence showcasing that whatever it might be with the caterpillars is not what you think it is. The more you know. It's something, alright. Envelopes with white powder sent to two Texas ICE officers, no public threat. This week, federal officials said two North Texas ICE field officers received envelopes with white powder, including one opened at the ICE Dallas field office on Friday. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said, Texas has been a focal point for assaults on ICE, with the Antifa July 4th attack charging 16 people and prior sniper and bomb threats at the ICE Dallas field office. While ICE Houston operations continue arrests of violent offenders and gang members. Responders, including a hazardous material team, the Federal Protective Service, and the Dallas Fire Department secured ICE facilities, enacted shelter-in-place procedures, inspected the sites, and cleared them to resume normal operations. The department emphasized enforcement and investigations, while cautioning against incendiary language, noting law enforcement and prosecutors nationwide are arresting and prosecuting attackers and threats. In recent months, attacks and threats against immigration officers have surged, with vehicular attacks on ICE officers raising 1,300% and death threats climbing 8,000%. Wow, that's a lot. A lot. Much more than I can ever imagine. But of course, I'm not surprised. There's a handful of people, whether it be in the US or anywhere around the world, who are listening to stories like this, that they do not like what ICE are doing to, well, mostly foreigners and immigrants that came to the US, and the ICE agents are sending them back to whichever country they have escaped from, or immigrated to even get to the United States in the first place. Whilst everyone is entitled to their opinions about ICE operations on people in the US, sending them threats and attacking officers is not going to make the situation any better. Again, you can express your outrage. People can express their outrage against ICE. However, to attack and send threats to them is not a good look for these people. In fact, it's actually more likely than not going to justify, not saying it will happen, but likely justify any reasons to send these people to not just the country of their ancestors, but possibly to exile these people out of the United States. Again, not likely to happen, but if it starts to get way out of hand, I feel it will come to a point that ICE, Department of Homeland Security, they're going to do something that not just going to spark more outrage among people who really do not like what ICE are doing with foreigners that are in the US, but only to have the same procedures happening to foreigners to also happen to US nationals. And even though they are legal, they were born and raised in US, if they notice that their parents or grandparents are from another country, who's going to stop the Department of Homeland Security or ICE to send those people to those countries? If they find out that their ancestors are from a country that immigrated to the US many years ago, and to send those people to those countries, even though they were not from that country, they were not born nor raised in that country. However, they were sent there because that was the country of origin for either their parents, grandparents, great grandparents, or however far back in your family's generation that might be. Anything is possible when it comes to immigration these days. So it's important that you stay prepared. And also, if there's any documentation that is expected, again, make sure you get that in check. So that way, if people come knocking at your door, well, they can't do anything to you because you filled the necessary paperwork and there's nothing they can do about it. That's all I will advise to people. As much as people have every right and they're entitled to not agree with these deportations, the reason why deportations like this are happening, they will likely point out that you don't meet particular criteria, you haven't filled out proper particular paperwork that will allow you to live here. But once that's done, okay, we'll leave you alone. But of course, it's not that doing that is not as easy or straightforward. I know there's a lot more to that, especially in countries that have stronger borders, that'll have stricter criteria and loads of complicated paperwork that even allows you to even reside in the country for a limited time. It's not easy going to another country. Well, there are some countries that's easy to settle down and immigrate and get citizenship for that country, but others, no, not so much. It's not going to be easy to just go to another country, reside there, fill whatever paperwork that that country asks you to do, and then bada boom, bada bing, you are now a resident slash citizen of country name, and just live your life how you want to live your life, and maybe contribute to your local community in the process. It's not easy whatsoever. And that is it for the episode.